Blessings to you all. Another beautiful day given to us from above. I want to share this devotion this early morning with you. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death, or sorrow, or crying, or pain. All these things are gone forever. Revelation 21, verse 4. In every life, there will be some dark valleys. Difficult days cannot be avoided. In fact, the lives of some believers seem to be filled with affliction and suffering. But for the follower of Christ, there is a glorious relief just ahead. The return of Christ in the clouds for his bride, the church, and the promise of a land of endless delight. But for now, we live in a fallen world, and not one of us is exempt from the difficulties and tragedies that stalk the path of every person that is born into this fallen race. But through this beautiful truth, God is giving us a tiny glimpse into the eternal ages to come, when the old order is done away with, and the Lord establishes a new heaven and a new earth under his perfect rule of law. The day is coming when the Lord himself will live with men, and they will be his people, and he will be their God. This will be a day when all wrongs are put right. Joy will replace sorrow, and God himself will dry every teardrop. Again, we must accept the fact that life is often full of troubles and disappointments. In fact, Jesus said, "In the world we will have troubles." But for followers of Christ, there is always a sight ahead which gives hope and joy. So many trials can break our hearts. Death of a loved one, serious illness, fatal diseases, divorce, bad choices, unemployment, job changes, and hurtful relationships, or a myriad of other things. God longs to shelter us in his arms and comfort us. There are burdens to carry now. There are battles that must be fought, and often there are tears to shed. But think of that day when God will be with his people in heaven. Here is the promise, and there will be no more death, or sorrow, or crying, or pain. What a day, home at last, free from conflict and struggle, free from the temptation to sin, free from the very presence of sin. Where there is no sin, there is no sorrow, there is no crying, no pain. Living in the presence of Jesus and finding it a delight to praise and serve him forever. We may not understand why we have to endure some of the things in life that cause such heartache and pain. But let us never forget that his eternal perspective is broader than our restricted view. He is our present help in trouble today, and so we can rejoice in his promise that he will wipe away the tears from all of our eyes. Keep your mind in peace. Keep your spirit in faith. One of the main things that holds people back is who they're spending time with. If you're hanging out with noisy people, you're going to be distracted. Start to compromise. Be jealous. Don't let their noise keep you from your destiny. If you'll make a change, God will bring you friends that lift you up and not pull you down, people that bring the best out of you and not the worst. So how can we have hope when everything looks hopeless? In Romans chapter 5, verses 3 to 5, Paul says that we can rejoice in our sufferings because we are a people of hope. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Romans 5, 3 to 5. So how can we have hope when everything looks hopeless? In the midst of suffering, we can rejoice because these challenges cause us to 1. Rely on God's presence. Rejoicing in suffering does not mean celebrating when bad news comes, but it does mean that we can believe that God is doing a redemptive work. This word redemptive means that God does not waste a hurt or disappointment. He is using them to shape and build us into the image of Jesus, which is his highest passion. When we go through suffering, we often pray and seek God more intensely than at other times. My greatest times of growth have been when I've reached the end of my resources, and all I have left is Jesus. God uses suffering to make us rely on His presence. In Psalm 23, verse 4, David writes that he does not fear because God is with him. He relies on God's presence, and it brings him strength and comfort. Remember that for there to be a shadow, there has to be a light. I don't know what your valley of the shadow of death is, but I do know who the light is that is walking with you in that valley. In another psalm, David reveals that one of the reasons for his joy is that he is forgiven. Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Psalm 31:1. We can't determine God's love for us based on good or bad circumstances. We determine His love based on the cross and what He did for us on it. 2. Rely on God's provision. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7, Paul reveals that he has suffered from a thorn in the flesh. God was so concerned about Paul not becoming proud, He allowed this to happen to him to prevent him from becoming conceited. In our current situations, God is saying to us that His grace is sufficient, and even when we feel weak, He is making us stronger than we have ever been. His grace is not an abstract idea. It is the person of Jesus through the power of the Holy Spirit. The hell you are going through may be the very circumstance God uses to take you to a whole new level. 3. Rely on God's power. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. 2 Corinthians 12:9b. What is your weakness? Maybe it is a son or a daughter that hasn't quite turned out the way you thought he or she would. A job situation that has gone awry. A medical diagnosis that has scared you. Maybe like Paul, it is also insults, hardships, or persecutions. Whatever it is, Paul says he will boast in those things because when we are weak, the power of Christ rests on us. The greater the enemy comes at you, the greater Jesus is in you. The greater the enemy comes at you, the greater Jesus is in you. Maybe you hear voices telling you to just quit, give up, and let it go. Don't stop. When you are weak, then He is strong. Remember, the greater the attack against you, the greater Christ is in you. But you have to rely on His presence, His provision, and His power. This week, take a moment to write down what you are suffering from or struggling with and place it in an envelope. On the outside, write, "God's got this, and He is transforming me." Now, when that challenge comes to mind, remember to rely on Him. Marinate on that. May God always bless you, and may you all go through life with Jesus Christ in your life.